Welcome to this edition of Just Ask Us. We're joined in the studio today with Dr. Bob Polomski, Clemson Extension Horticulturist, and his guest, Ted Stevens, founder of Nurseries Caroliniana in North Augusta. His retail garden center focuses on rare and unusual plant material. Ted travels to Japan and other foreign countries on an annual basis to collect new plant selections for introduction to the American market. His latest travels took him to North Korea and China. He'll share his discoveries and stories with us today. So if you're wondering what different plants are available to incorporate into your landscape, this is a place to be. So give us a call with your questions or concerns. Just use our toll-free number to join the conversation. It's 1-888-539-8859. That's 1-888-539-8859. And it's all yours, Bob.
Thanks very much, Bob. It's a pleasure joining you this morning. And in the studio, Bob Schuster had said that, yes, to my right is Ted Stevens. He is the owner of Nurseries Caroliniana in North Augusta. Welcome, Ted, to the program.
Thank you, Bob.
And then opposite of me is a nurseryman, plantsman, as well as a graduate student, Zach Ziebach. And Zach said he's not going to try to say too much this morning, but I do welcome Zach joining us in the studio as well. Now, before I begin, Ted, I have to say I've known Ted Stevens for quite some time. And as I drove in today, thinking about today's program, I cannot help but realize that you are one of the legends of horticulture. You know, and so when I think, and normally people say whenever you recognize individuals, you'll offend someone you leave out. I don't care. All right. So when I think of you immediately, I think of J.C. Ralston. And the passion that J.C. had for plants, the willingness to share. He traveled far and wide, just like you have as well. And when I think about the other individuals that are legends, of course, Dr. Michael Durr, Dr. Alan Armitage, Marjorie Jenkins in Louisiana. I mean, what a fine person she is. And Ted is a part of that elite group. And I'm so thankful that he chose to come in today to talk about some of his experiences abroad. He had recently come back from a trip in China as well as in North Korea. But also, Ted is going to be speaking to my class this afternoon. I teach a plant materials class. And I want young people to be inspired by this man who is leaving some big footprints behind him, but he's still forging on ahead. And I just like to be able to ride his coattails like a lot of other folks who appreciate the plants that he introduces to us, but also to share in his enthusiasm. So now that we got that intro out of the way, Ted, I do really want to talk. I mean, you're coming off this great experience abroad. You have traveled to Japan. We've, on a number of occasions, have been in the studio talking about your travels to Japan. But let's move that to the side for the moment and just talk about your recent experience in China as well as in North Korea.
Well, mostly China was going through China to get to North Korea. So I didn't have a very long stay over like I would. I was able to wander around the hotel and check out some plants and things like that, but I didn't get to do much plant exploring in China. I do have some contacts there, which have gotten us some really neat new tea olives, osmanthus, fragrance, and it's nice to have those contacts. But mostly I was going to teach at Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, which we normally refer to as PUST, P-U-S-T. It does have a Facebook page, and you can check it out there. And it's very unusual. It's a privately funded university in North Korea, which sounds like a paradox almost, but nonetheless it is, and private individuals have supported this. This is a gentleman had this vision, Dr. Kim, and it's incredible what he's able to accomplish. A 500-acre campus with buildings and 500 plus undergraduates and about 60 graduate students. It's about 600 students all told. And the amazing part about it is, I heard about this opportunity a couple of years ago from a friend of mine, and George Sturm. He's a PhD, a doctor in statistics, and sharing with me teaching there that so my desire to share, my love of plants and horticulture with somebody that didn't have that great opportunity it really stirred my heart. So I started looking into it, into going there, and it was amazing. I didn't know we as Americans could get into North Korea. I mean, to me that was just can you do that? And you have to put in a rather lengthy application. And, I mean, it's about 4 pages, and they want it handwritten. They will not take a typed copy. You have to apply by hand, and they approve it. It takes a while. You can get the maximum visa you can get in North Korea is 12 weeks. So I said, well, I'm a full-time businessman. I could go in the fall maybe in the nursery business. I couldn't. They begged me to come back next spring, but I said that would be just about impossible in the nursery business. So anyway, I ventured over there this past fall for 6 weeks teaching. They asked me to teach ecology and horticulture. Well, what we did was started with ecology and kind of migrated towards horticulture and plant materials and landscape design. And it just blew me away that those students just craved knowledge on what we have. I know we probably think of us as them thinking of us as being the big Satan, but you didn't feel any of that. I mean, it was absolutely incredible the way they just yearned. I was just sharing with Zach that we almost daily they would ask you to eat with them in the dining room. They would make appointments a day or two ahead, say, can you eat with me at lunch? Can you eat with me at supper? And so anyway, the tables
sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And it's getting used to their culture and their respect for teachers, it kind of blew me away. I walk in the classroom and everybody stands.
Well, Ted, one moment. I'm hoping my students are listening to this right now. Keep going.
Okay.
Respect for teachers. I like that.
Yeah, it was amazing. All the teaching had to be done in coat and tie, unfortunately, but that's one of those stipulations. The students all wear coats and ties, and so when we would go out on a lab, I asked, they had not been used to going out on labs, and I said, we've got to go out on some labs. We've just got to do that. And well, anyway, so if they have a question in the class, they raise their hand, you recognize them, they stand. They ask the question. They stay standing until you finish answering the question. When you leave at the end of the day, you grab up your laptop and walk out the room, they all stand. So
oh my.
To get used to this culture, it's mostly Asian culture. I have a little friend at church. She's an exchange student from China. She said, yeah, that's what we do all the time. So it wasn't anything new to her, but it was to me, and getting accustomed to this. Well, you might can imagine that. Now,
well, before you go any further,
okay.
I was just curious about the language. Was there a barrier in speech?
Yes and no. They are taught. Well, let me explain this. This university is rather unique. That all the teaching is done in English. Okay, which really surprised me. But the North Koreans have 6 years of English in their public schools. And with the 6 years of English, it's all mostly in grammar, very little pronunciation. So they would explain that to me as we were eating and all that. They had good grammar, good basics, but very little pronunciation. So the first year at Poost, this university, they're immersed in English. It's just 100% English, mainly teaching them pronunciation, of course, grammar too, because they go a step further than they had in public schools. So by the time I get them, I was teaching third-year students. Well, really, they were fourth-year students. They call fourth-year seniors and then fifth-year super seniors. So that's the way they line up their years. But nonetheless, all the teaching is done in English. Now, a problem, my southern accent, because it's amazing. You know, I would say probably half of the English teachers were of British origin, and where they would say controversy and we say controversy, well, that sounds to them like two completely different words. That's nothing even related there. And I got that. And then one of my companions over there, he was a pharmacist, he said, Ted, they came to me and they said, this man says y'all. So,
what's the translation of that?
Yeah, they caught on pretty quick. Well, anyway, so I found out one thing. So that necessitated typing all of my notes for them so I could give them to the students. because when you're talking about technical terms, you want correct spelling and this. We didn't have a textbook. I mean, I had one, but they didn't. Now, there are a lot of things about the culture over there. The undergraduates cannot get on the Internet. Matter of fact, their computers are disabled, so they cannot get on the Internet. So they will, a number of times we might get around to this, but they would ask me, can you download, I could take a PDF file from the Internet, download it for them, but it had to go through what's called the DPRK approval process. That's the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't say North Korea to them. As far as they're concerned, there's one Korea. There's not a North and a South. So it's DPRK. But anything I gave the students had to be typed out, given to this DPRK approval office, the Academic Affairs Office. They had to look through it and approve every word, and then you could reproduce it and give it to the students. I never had any problem there, and I had brought some ideas which were probably somewhat revolutionary, I'm suspecting. But I had no problem getting approved. I was really a little surprised. But nonetheless, it went well in that respect. So I would give them these articles, and then they could follow along. I would do a PowerPoint where they could see it. They would have it in front of them on a sheet of paper. So then that helped overcome some of the pronunciation barriers that I was experiencing with them.
My friends, you are listening to Just Ask Us. We are broadcasting live at, let's see, we are broadcasting live at 107.9 WFBS on your dial. And also we are internet streaming live as well at WFBSFM.com. And so if you do have any questions, and I realize that my guest here, Ted, we could spend the whole hour talking about his experience in North Korea teaching horticulture as well as ecology for a 6-week period. I do want to take that conversation a little bit further, but my friends, I still would like to hear from you. We've got an incredible plantsman with us. We're also joined by a graduate student as well as nurseryman, Zach Ziebach. And Zach, don't be shy. You've got your earphones on and there's a big microphone right in front of you. So if you have any thoughts, comments, questions, maybe you can start the ball rolling with our listeners. That toll-free number, if you'd like to reach us, is 1-888-539-8859. Or if you prefer not to have your voice on the radio, you could email us at web@wfbsfm.com. So, Ted, I just want to go back to some of the contrasts, maybe some of the similarities with the students that you've interacted with in North Korea versus the students here. But also, you have spoken just all over the place to American audiences. Just curious, what is the level of enthusiasm or passion for plants that you experienced in North Korea with those undergraduate and graduate students?
Well, it was amazing because I went thinking, I'm going to look for some new things to bring back, my passion for doing that. Well, there was nothing new. It was a very low selection of varieties of plant materials.
Excuse me, you have visited nurseries then?
There were no nurseries there. None. I did not see a nursery or a garden center in North Korea. It really makes your heart yearn if somebody really wants plants. Well, I had some students in there, just like you get, as you know, with all classes. Some have that passion, for plants, and others are just there because it's another course they're taking. Well, some of them, they would ask me questions because this is what we as Americans don't appreciate, the freedom we have and the abundance that we have. When I would show them plants, landscaping in America, when I would meet with them for lunch or dinner, they would say, "We cannot believe the landscaping. We cannot believe that." When I showed them pictures of Central Park in New York, all they did, I just noticed the whole student, it was 20 students, all they did was turn and look at one another. They couldn't comprehend anything this magnificent. And then so we would look down, and I caught myself showing them, residential landscaping, and then it all of a sudden dawns on you, these kids will never have a house like that. They're stuck in these 30 to 35-story apartment buildings in downtown Pyongyang, which are just little cubicles, like a honeycomb with apartments. And it's not comfortable. These places, I'm told, they get so cold in the winter. Now, their electricity can go out on you just about any time. We fortunately, at the university, we were right on the south edge of town. I could look south and see fields. Matter of fact, ringneck pheasants were on campus. North, I could see the city. And one of my friends, his room faced the city. Mine faced south, which was a blessing when it got cold because there's very little heat in the buildings. So he would say in the evening, all of a sudden, about 7 o'clock, all those huge apartment buildings would just light up because they had been out of electricity all day, and they gave them a couple of hours to get done what they needed to do, and then it would go off. But there's a lot of show there because they kind of cultivate a downtown area that's just absolutely blows your mind, impressive, with huge buildings lit up gorgeously in the evening, and you think, wow. Well, the best indication of this would be go on the internet and plug in North Korea satellite view or something like that, and you'll see South Korea is just lit up, and North Korea is just a dark blotch. That it's that much different. So they had to get used to this culture. I was sharing with Zach that the kids go out playing at night, soccer, and they're kicking the ball. I can't even see it. In the dark. And it's like they've learned to live in that situation so long that they just do it and never complain. I've never heard a complaint about anything over there. It's just absolutely incredible. Again, I say it makes you really appreciate America more and more the more you see what they don't have and yet what they are appreciative of. So they would ask me, like, if I wanted to landscape my apartment, and I had to think, that's all they're going to have. They're not going to have a garden area that they could grow in the ground.
So you did not see any community gardens?
Yes, a few. You would see a few community gardens.
Parks, green spaces?
In some of the there were some parks in town, mainly government operated, not for individuals to use. But in the poorer parts of town, it's kind of hidden behind walls. But you could see they would cultivate like gourds and squash and let them go. Since there was so little area to grow on, they would drape them over the houses. So all these squash, the total houses, over the roofs of their houses. Yeah, to give them room to grow.
Oh, my.
And the whole culture, it's anything level in North Korea is a field, is a growing situation because it's so mountainous. Of course, North Korea has more agricultural fields than South Korea does. But South Korea's, now this might boggle your mind, the South Korean economy is 30 times that of North Korea. So when you look at that, you can understand why. I was telling you just a little before we started, I was trying to help them in rooting cuttings. Well, we used to miss systems and timers, and we'll forget about that. They've never seen that. So I was showing them how instead of just misting the cuttings with a little mist bottle every little while, they would come in and mist them. They could make a little tent of polyethylene over their trays. And keep the humidity in there, then they wouldn't have to be wetting the cutting so much. And I started to say, take a coat hanger and bend it, and then all of a sudden, you can't find a coat hanger over there. You can't even find a piece of wire to do something that simple. So there are plenty of weeping willows on campus. I said, go out and cut you some branches off the weeping willow there. You could make you some little hoops, and sure enough, it worked.
That's clever.
And they did it. And at first, he tried some sticks that weren't limber and green, and they cracked all of it. I said, no, you got to get weeping willow. And so little things like that we just take so for granted. And
I was just curious with regard to the plant material that they were rooting. Did you bring plant material with you,
no,
or
I
did
didn't.
You harvest it from the campus?
It's fascinating that you might find this incredible. Dr. Pilju, she's Dr. Kim Pilju, she's the dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and that's half the university, and then the other half is more, engineering and that area. So Dr. Pilju, she is South Korean born, lived for years in Minneapolis, Minnesota. 27 years ago, she's about 80 right now. 27 years ago, they brought her to North Korea. That was not a functioning, profitable farm in North Korea until Dr. Pilju got there. And she, a devout Christian and believer, she just revolutionized, organized these farms. And since she has done that, their agriculture has prospered. One woman. And she's there. She's the dean at the university. So she's just amazing. And she wants to come here in January. I'd love to be able to bring her to Clemson. But nonetheless, she's going. We're going to try to.
She's 80 years old.
She's 80 years old and still going all the time, every day. I mean, it's just amazing. She doesn't slow down, going up and down these stairs. There's no such thing as an elevator over there. Or a clothes dryer. I would do my laundry and hang it up in the room to dry it out. But Dr. Pilju, she's just an amazing, just her desire to, and she's just such an organizer. And I could tell that when we would have faculty meetings and, just the way she would organize things, just a precious individual. Well, anyway, she wants to come over. So we were looking at what are the possibilities of plant material that they could grow and eat, because we think so much in ornamentals, they're thinking they're just surviving. Now, you never see these things like people picture here, dead people on the streets and all. I mean, it's quite overblown. I found that out. Mm-hmm. The only I was sharing somebody the other day. I don't think I saw a single overweight person in North Korea, let alone a fat person, unless it's their supreme leader. And everybody else was just thin and trim, and just it was just amazing. And my sister's always saying, "Don't eat rice; it's fattening." Well, if you saw the rice those kids eat, and that wasn't a fat one in the lot, you would change your tune there.
Oh my.
We just in the school with 600 students, they buy 10 tons of rice a month for the dining room to feed those students. It's just amazing.
That's a lot of rice.
That's a lot of rice.
Oh my.
It's amazing.
And so, with regard to your selection of the plant material, you went with the dean?
Yeah. Now, here's what she was doing. I mean, just to get something different, she would go out into China or Japan and buy roses in a floral shop and bring them in so they could try to root them.
Oh my.
I mean, this is how desperate they are to get something new. So here we're trying to design something. So I had to change my whole thought process as far as what we'll do there. So I started talking to Dr. Pilju, and they need something to grow in these 30-story apartment buildings that will survive low light and cold. Now, you say cold, yes. In the winter, they have so little heat in those buildings. We were told that they will build igloos in their apartments to accumulate heat so that the kids could sleep at night. I mean, this is how.
My goodness.
I mean, you could think if it gets 20 below zero Fahrenheit over there, which it will in the winter sometimes, then it's cold in those apartments with so little heat, and so it's just so I'm thinking, well, akubas, they're beautiful foliage. They will take the cold. I mean, in an apartment, they would probably take 20 below low light levels. We were trying to think. They said, "Oh, but we need something that flowers." And yeah, you rack your brain, something that will take the cold and flower too. And the only thing I get there is some camellias. They had never seen a Camellia japonica or Camellia sasanqua. Never.
But
when I showed them
from
pictures,
that part of the world.
Yes, that's what I said.
My.
And see, so it got them so excited. And what I would try to do is make them appreciate what they could grow or at once had. And so I would show them, as far as ecology is concerned, I'm a bird person too. I raised parrots and all that. As a kid, I had pheasant and quail and ducks and geese and peafowl. But nonetheless, I've always just so admired mandarin ducks. It's one of the most gorgeous birds in the world, and it's native to China. Well, it was native to North Korea, but it's not a bird there anymore. I said, because the countryside had been so ravaged with war and everything else, their environment's completely destroyed. I said, now, if one of you kids could get together, and start a program to reestablish that duck in North Korea. Wouldn't that be exciting? To make them see something that they could do to improve their life or that situation there in that country.
My friends, you are listening to Just Ask Us, and I am speaking to Ted Stevens. He is the owner of Nurseries Caroliniana in North Augusta, South Carolina. And to his right is Zach Ziebach, a graduate student as well as a nurseryman as well. And we are enjoying this discussion. If you care to ask us a question relative to Mr. Stevens' adventure in North Korea or in China, and we might even start talking about Japan, but I really want to start talking more about plant material. But first, I would like to tell you our toll-free number is 1-888-539-8859. And if you would like to email us, it's at radio-l@clemson.edu. And you could also listen to us on the internet at wfbsfm.com. So, Ted, just was curious about, the plants that you had suggested for rooting. What did you settle on?
Well,
roses, camellias?
No, we thought. I was thinking blueberries, because here's a plant that would grow there, and would thrive there. It's beautiful. It has flowers. I love the foliage. I love the fall color. It's easy to cultivate. Very few pest problems on it, like you have with a lot of the larger fruits, and there are a lot of real cold hardy cultivars of blueberries that they could grow. And I said, and I asked Dr. Pildew, I said, have you ever tried? She said, years ago, they brought in some, and then they just lost them, got neglected. And so here again is a problem. They don't have a good potting soil. I got to thinking, well, when they took me and showed me what they were using, they don't even have any nursery containers. They were taking cooking oil containers from the dining hall, cutting the tops off, cutting holes in the bottom, and using those for their pots. That's the closest thing to a pot I saw. And just, we take so much for granted.
And if I may interrupt you, years ago, a couple of the older nurserymen and women had told me that when they talk about production in cans, it's because, my understanding, like in South Georgia, they use tomato cans.
Exactly. We did too early on.
Okay, and so almost realizing that they do have a ways to go.
Exactly.
With their industry.
We were there at one time.
That's right. Yeah, but please, I'm sorry for interrupting you. But,
that's okay.
So they use the cooking oil cans.
Yeah, they used to cook. They were
But
plastic.
how about the media itself? And before you go any further with that, Ted, please explain to our listeners who right now are probably interested in trying to grow plants indoors. Why can't you just go out to the backyard and just haul out a couple of gallons of soil out of the backyard?
Well, that's what they had done. And they took me to their upstairs classroom where they were doing their experiments with, and they were actually rooting some of these hybrid tea roses that came out of a florist. It kind of blew me away that they get a few roots on them. But they were potting them up. It's just like they went out the back and dug up some of this. Now, their soil must be pretty good, because the flush of growth on some maples, Acer Friedmanni, the hybrid between, I forget, is it Acer rubrum and Acer saccharum?
That's right.
Okay. And
sorry, red and silver.
Yeah, red and silver. Okay, so that's saccharinum. And so it was fascinating, the growth they were getting on these things. I mean, 4 and 5 feet flushes of growth.
That's incredible.
It was. It blew me away. So I said, the soil has obviously got some fertility to it to be able to do that. Well, anyway, and that was unirrigated too, non-irrigated situation. So anyway, we were looking at the soil that they were using, and it was just like you said, dug up from the backyard. It was this heavy,
a lot of clay,
very rocky clay, and I said, oh. And you look and you're so shocked you want to say, oh wait, and you just try to kind of calm yourself down. you've got to explain. They need to do. So I said, we've got to figure out some way. We're used to pine bark being a byproduct of the timber and the paper pulp industry that we're so blessed with, and it's cheap and it's perfect. I mean, we just add a little sand to it to give it some weight, but other than that, you add your micros and your other elements to it, and it's wonderful. Nothing like that. So we were saying, there were rice fields all around the campus. I said, how about rice husks? Could they be taken and, decomposed for a little while and maybe incorporated. Tons of soybeans. Matter of fact, one of my favorite foods over there was sprouted soybeans. They would serve them almost daily, probably daily, in the lunch hall. The menu, I got to love it.
I imagine you've never eaten that healthy in your entire life.
I hadn't. When I got back, the first thing people say when they got off the plane, "Wow, you're thin." Well, anyway.
Oh my! So the rice hulls, and when you're looking at that as amending it with soil.
Yes, and then maybe the soybean plants, because they were out there beating out these dried up soybean plants to get the seed from them. Then they would sprout for the dining room. And I saw these piles of these dead soybean plants, and so I thought, you could compost those, maybe with the rice hulls, and somehow we could amend soil to get something a little more viable to grow as a potting mix.
Yeah, please, be more specific for our listeners. What kind of potting mix are you looking for in these container growing?
The soil they had in them was so heavy. And they lugged these things. They were on the 5th floor of this classroom building. I can't imagine. I would say they were like about 3 gallon. They're probably some number of liters, but whatever. We think in gallons. These oil containers, cooking oil containers, probably peanut oil or whatever they used over there. And can you imagine that the weight of that thing filled up with just regular outdoor potting mix? It would have weighed tons. I mean,
and you put some water in there,
and
the
weight just goes up exponentially. So I'm just trying to think of what can we do, because to get a nursery industry there, which is what they really want, you've got to have a growing medium.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could grow them in the ground and sell everything bare root, but you need to have. Now, it was rather fascinating to see these huge apartment buildings, and they all had a little balcony, and out of the balcony there were 2 things: a solar panel, so that they could supplement what little electricity they had, plus geranium plants. Now, if you think about it, I've noticed at home, like last winter, geraniums weren't even killed in our mild winter. I mean, we got down into the 20s. There were geranium plants that just came back. Begonias. They're more cold-hardy than we give them credit for being, I think. And I thought, well, and I would see them on these balconies. I said, well, they had to have survived that winter in those apartments that got below freezing. And it was amazing. But when you look at the soil they were growing in, I thought, for them to get, I don't know what they used to supplement for their for their fertilizer. I don't know. But nonetheless, they looked good.
Mm-hmm.
The plants had flowers on them. They were just not what we would consider prime plants, but they were enough to make a plant lover happy, when you're stuck in one of those little cubicles of those apartment buildings. So.
You are listening, my friends, to Just Ask Us. My name is Bob Polomski here in the Madron Center, and I am joined by my friend Ted Stevens, the owner of Nurseries Caroliniana, as well as Zach Ziebach. He is a graduate student as well as a nurseryman himself. And we are enjoying this discussion of Ted Stevens' visit to North Korea. You talked about the vertical gardening, but with regard going back to trying to create a potting mix. So you were able to compost the soybean debris, I would call that,
right,
as well as the rice hulls.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of combination did you use?
Well, we haven't worked all of that out yet. I was just trying to identify for them what they could start composting. Because
that'd be a great experiment.
Yeah, it would be. And it's amazing. I sat in on a master's thesis defense. I considered it one of the best I've ever heard. This young student, he took aspergillosis. And I raise birds, so I'm familiar with some of these respiratory diseases that birds get, particularly in like chicken houses. Aspergillosis, which is a disease of respiratory system. He took hypericum, St. John's wort. He extracted hypericin, which is a chemical in hypericum. Of course, the number of species of hypericum we have here in South Carolina, looking native flora of the Carolinas, they're between 70 and 80 species and subspecies of hypericum right here in our state. But this student...
Or St. John's wort.
St. John's wort, right. Yeah, I need to get used to using more common names. Okay, so St. John's wort. And his his literature review was incredible in itself. I brought that thesis back. I'd love to share it with somebody sometime because it's just so incredible. His 15 pages of literature review, which was just absolutely incredible. And now the graduate students can get on the internet. Matter of fact, I helped some of them download PDF files from the internet. But nonetheless, he used this hypericin, incorporating it into their feed. And it was absolutely incredible. He drew, statistical results from it that were viable. And he had no mortality with the chickens. So they were suggesting. Matter of fact, there was a Chinese researcher there listening in on the defense as well. Matter of fact, he had developed a strain of Bacillus thuringiensis, of corn that had the chemical from Bacillus thuringiensis incorporated into the genes of the corn that makes the corn totally cornea worm resistant, because it's and so he was a brilliant geneticist. So he told this fellow, he says, look, if you develop this further, he said, you could be a millionaire. Now they don't even think in terms like that because the government owns everything, all the houses, all the land. They just put them where they want them to be. And I thought, here again, it was enough to stir the fascination in everybody there. I mean, there were plenty of medical doctors even sitting in. I flew over with a lady. She's a kidney specialist from Southern California, native South Korean, naturalized here. You can't come into North Korea if you're South Korean. You have to become somewhere else and naturalized, and then they'll accept you back. And she was just blown away. She just said,
That's a great
this
story.
is just incredible. And so it had never been done before. And here he's got proof, of its the properties that will cure aspergillosis and these respiratory diseases in chickens, which and the university has a chicken farm. Matter of fact, a real treat for the students was about 2 or 3 times a week they would get a boiled egg to carry home for a midnight snack. It was just no sweets whatsoever. There was not. I don't think they owned sugar at the dining room. And what fascinates people so much there too in eating, it's no drink served with the meals. You have soup, kimchi, rice, and then various other things, which I really took to quite well. I mean, I loved it, every bit of it. So it was rather fascinating.
So now I was just curious. Now, as a business person, how do you see perhaps the American nursery industry making inroads into North Korea? Are there any possibilities? And with regard to the plant material, my guess is it may be sort of a one-way effort because you feel like right now there's this dearth of plant material in North Korea.
And they don't respect any plant patents, any trademarks or anything like that. I mean, it's a country. I mean, they've got to learn that if they're going to work with world community, they've got to learn that they've got to abide by certain rules that the rest of the world lives by, and they don't. And so that's a problem. So whatever's taken there, and they were familiar when I started talking about plant patents. They knew what I was talking about, and so I said, well, when you have that system, you can make money, but unless you respect the system, you're not. And so it was fascinating talk. I had no idea they even knew what a plant patent was, but they did. They were well aware of plant patents because they get a certain amount of international business. This is these professors trying to teach them. So in the faith of those people, of the South Koreans wanting to reunite that country, and you think, well, this will never happen. But the faith of those people, I mean, they would allow us as Christians to have our own services there on campus. We could take our Bibles in. The friend who was the kidney specialist from Southern California, she had hers confiscated because it was in Korean, but ours is in English, so that wasn't a problem. But they're just so have so many rules and regulations in that respect. When you left campus, you had to have a minder with you to go anywhere you went. If you took a picture, you better ask, is it okay to take this picture? I probably varied from that a little bit, but it was, you would see things and you say, I've got to get a picture of this, just to prove it's really happened.
Ted, this has really been so enjoyable. We still have some time, but I just wanted our listeners to know that they are listening to Just Ask Us at 107.9 on their dial. Our toll-free number is 1-888-539-8859. And if you'd like to join in the conversation with Ted Stevens and me, as well as Zach Ziebach. Zach, I'm waiting for a question from you, my friend. He's a graduate student as well as a plantsman as well. What I would like to do is steer the conversation now more toward plants in the U.S. because Mr. Stevens will be speaking to my landscape plants class this afternoon. And I've got this wonderful list that he has sent beforehand, and I was actually salivating when I looked at the 57 plants that he's going to be going over with us today. And what's really, really wonderful, Ted, is with your travels abroad and your fascination, not only with southeastern native species, but ornamental species in general. Can you talk about some of the plants that we need to think about? But before you get to that, Ted, I want to tell you that it's been really dry here, and we were probably 11 inches below normal a couple of weeks ago. We did get some rain yesterday, and hopefully not this afternoon when Jeff Adelberg has to conduct his lab out in the field. But in any event, it's just really great to see the rain.
Yes, it is.
And so now that we've got the rain, we know fall is for planting. If you have any favorite plants, some of them that may be, I know at the tail end our osmanthus have finished their bloom season, but the transition period, how about we begin with that? Going into the fall and winter, you mentioned camellias, but in that transition period where right now I feel in the upstate I could put a shovel in the ground now without hurting myself.
Right.
All right, the ground is moist enough. But are there any favorites that you have for bringing people outside in the fall and winter months? Any really interesting species, cultivars?
Well, I just always have taught people, when I'm teaching, I say, when you plant something, think about year-round color. I'm from Augusta, and when you say plant something, they said, well, does it bloom during the Masters? and I'll say, well, there are another 51 weeks out of the year. And so you always, when I would go out landscaping, and you'd present a plant that you spend hours on, and say, well, does it flower during the? That's all they cared about. I said, so to realize there are so many plants in the South that flower right through the winter, and we kind of take maybe camellias for granted because we've got the wonderful collection out at the botanical garden, and it's been there since it was rather large when I was there 50 years ago. So it time flies, and so I try to emphasize different times of look for. We've already gone, like you said, through the fall with osmanthus, tea olives. Well, I can't get over the number. That's the number one plant we ship all over the country. We
osmanthus fragrance?
Osmanthus fragrance. It is unreal. And they're mostly to Asian customers. Now,
Why?
Bob, I remember about last time I spoke to your class 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember how long it was. And I brought some little sample plants up. I didn't today, but anyway. And gave them, and there were about 5 Chinese students in your class. And you said one of the little girls just cried when she got it because their identity with that plant surpasses anything I've ever thought about of a love for a plant. And they have osmanthus festivals in China. And I was so close, wanted to go, but getting in and out of North Korea was quite a problem. So you weren't free to travel that much. But it's amazing. And we sell these things. Our top states for selling them in is California, Oregon, and Washington. Now, can they grow them out there? Yes. Why don't nurseries grow them out there? I have no idea, but it doesn't bother me at all because we sell them. And we'll laugh sometimes. I remember, and they'll get together in little groups, these Asian customers, and hoping to get a better price. And we were shipping, I think, one shipment this past spring, and it was 79 plants, all osmanthus, different varieties of osmanthus, tea olives, and it's just it kind of blows our mind. But they're learning them, and we ship them to the northern areas, and they use them as house plants. They grow them as house plants, and so I've had to do something on our website to identify to help them understand what it's like to grow a plant that's meant to be outside in a situation in a container. It's used to being in full sun, but you're trying to grow it inside. They don't care as long as they get those few little flowers in the fall. Now, I always wondered, why do you call it tea olive? Well, I first got educated on that from our Asian customers. They says, oh, we put the flowers in our tea. It gives them a certain wonderful fragrance and bouquet about the aroma that's why it's tea olive. You put the flowers and you steep the osmanthus flowers in your tea when you make your tea, and it will. So I told this to an English friend of mine in Aiken, and so she tried it. Of course, we know the English fantasy for tea, and she said, "Oh, that was the most absolutely unbelievable smelling tea I've ever had in my life." So this is why they'll grow them inside just to get in the fall those few little bags. Well, you can buy in Japan and China, you can buy bags of dried tea olives. Well, I was at the Georgia Tech game last year, and it was just that month, that week, that the osmanthus, it wasn't even fragrance, it's osmanthus heterophyllus over there behind the soccer stadium. And
it was in bloom.
The ground, we came around the corner. It was a rainy day, if you recall. You probably don't, but I do. And the ground, it looked like it had snowed. And I thought, oh, wow, if one could have collected those flowers and dried them. We don't think of that in this country. That might be a marketable item here.
Ted, you're a businessman. Oh, my gosh. Wow, what a great story.
But it is fascinating. So I had to be educated. Why tea olives? Because you put the flowers in the tea.
But I really love that idea for the fall. And then there's this beautiful orange flower run. You're wearing this beautiful Clemson shirt with the orange, and I was just thinking about that wonderful one. I don't remember the present taxonomy of that aurantiacus, that orange flowered osmanthus fragrance, which reminds me, and I have to mention this brand name because it smells like juicy fruit gum.
Right.
It has that beautiful aroma. And interestingly as well, we initially talked about the camellias, like the japonicas, with the big gorgeous blooms. They look sculpted. Sadly, nary a fragrance.
Right.
On the other hand, with the osmanthus, there are times I'd be in the garden with the students, and we would smell this beautiful fragrance and wonder, where's it coming from? Yeah. And tucked in the axils of those leaves are those gorgeous clusters, little bouquets of those flowers.
Well, we've got a new cultivar, and our Asian customers ask us, will you ever have this cultivar? The Chinese pronunciation is Changjiang Tiger. Well, anyway, I got a little Chinese friend to translate it for me, or pronounce it so I would know how to pronounce it.
That was beautiful. It just rolled off your tongue.
Well, anyway, so that translation from Chinese into English is double heaven fragrance.
Oh, my God.
So this variety is twice as fragrant as anything else out there, and it really is. I'm not a good smeller because of my sinuses, but I let all my ladies pass the smell test, and every one of them said, "Oh, this is unreal." We'll be introducing that this next summer.
Okay, so originally I remember you were talking about Fuding Zhao, and that
is a particularly floriferous variety. I mean, it's fragrant.
It is fragrant,
but I mean, you can see it 100 yards away.
That's right.
I always used to tell people with osmanthus, you smell it before you can see it, but this one you can see it before you can smell it. I mean, it's that showy. But like you said, the oranges and the yellows, the Thunbergii. Matter of fact, when I was a graduate student up here, there was a thing back then in the 50s and 60s where I think it was a branch of the USDA, and it was called the Bureau of Plant Introduction. They would send you this little list from the National Arboretum on things. You'd check it off if you wanted to try it, and they would send you a little rooted cutting. Well, we got a couple of, I didn't know what it was then, Osmanthus fragrans Thunbergii. And we planted them in the shade house, and then we stuck them out in the garden. Well, those plants, that's a yellow flowering form. And some people particularly swear by that form. They think that's the most fragrant of all. They all smell good to me. But yet it's very cold hardy. So when we had, it was either 8 or 9 below zero in Clemson in 1985, that January, whatever it was, 13th, those plants didn't have a burnt leaf on them. So I took cuttings off of those plants, and I've named it Clemson Hardy, just simply because it survived that cold. Now, we don't think of tea olives as being that cold hardy.
No, not at all.
But these were. And so the orange and the yellow flowering, I'm convinced, are the most cold hardy. But also Osmanthus heterophyllus, the little, you might say, holly leaf form that has the real prickly leaf. Well, as they get old and mature, they go from the juvenile leaf to the adult leaf, so they've only got a single little prick right in the end of the leaf. Well, anyway, that one might even be more cold hardy than the others, and we've got a miniature of that, and the name in Japanese is Kaorihime, which means fragrant princess. So we can take one plant of that and stick it in our office, and the whole office is fragrant from that. And it flowers at a little age, like 12 to 14 inches high.
How beautiful.
And then full bloom right now. And it's just, I'll show it to your class this afternoon. So
Love to see that. My friends, you are listening to Just Ask Us, and we would like you to ask us. If you have any questions or comments, our toll-free number is 1-888-539-8859. And talking about osmanthus, and my soon-to-be speaker this afternoon is Ted Stevens. He is the owner of Nurseries Caroliniana in North Augusta, South Carolina. And I'm also joined by graduate student and nurseryman Zach Ziebach as well. And if you'd like to email us, feel free to do so at radio-l@clemson.edu. So, Ted, we talked about the osmanthus for those fall flowers, but I'll tell you that over the course of this semester, I do also have a period in the middle of summer that I really feel that we need to find something in that window. And of course, you and I remember even John Elsley talking about the importance of foliage, that you need to have something that's not ephemeral like flowers.
Right.
But still, it's kind of nice in the middle of summer, torrid, humid. You don't want to be out there. What kind of plants will draw people outside, out of the air conditioning, to encounter these specimens? Do you have a short list of these plants?
I would have to. You've hit me with something. I'd have to think for a minute. People are always asking me, "Now, can you give me a list for this?" I said, and then the minute I walk out, "Oh, why didn't I mention that?"
Well, let me start you with okay. One. The one that I'm really fond of are the clethras.
Wow.
You know the summer sweet, and it's deciduous. The fall color is not really that outstanding, but I really feel, and you talked about a little bit about exercise and nutrition earlier, just to get people outdoors, away from technology. And I really feel that something like a clethra alnifolia, we've got so many wonderful cultivars. Fred Galley, who you also know as well, had developed or had released a number of more compact versions. So, for that window of opportunity, for the wonderful fragrance, those beautiful spikes of very fragrant flowers, thinking about putting it around a deck area where people congregate, I feel some of these plants lend themselves to that. And clethra alnifolia, or summer sweet or sweet pepper bush is another name for it. Is a wonderful native that people really need to connect with.
Yeah, and it has a good fall color, a good yellow fall color too. If it doesn't get dry like we have had this year. Another one is it kind of fills that little gap between those. That we have such a abundant of flower right there in April. It's Cyrilla, and I've got it on my.
Yes.
We've got two native Cyrillas, and I'm thinking so in Latin names I can't think of Cyrilla. And they're two species. Tai. There we go. I don't know if a lot of people know it better as Cyrilla, but it will grow sitting in water on the driest hillside. It'll grow in sun or shade. I've never seen deer touch it. I mean, and right now that's one of our top criterion for plants. Will deer eat it? Because we're having to surround our whole nursery with deer fencing because they've gotten such a problem. But that's another wonderful plant. It's native, and it's just spectacular in flower and in seed. In the fall, the seed are showy.
Ted, I'm so happy you mentioned that, because in the middle of summer, I feel like I'm the only one outside. And in the botanical garden, we do have that Cyrilla arida and racemiflora. Right. Now, we've got this marine habitat. We've got the racemiflora growing there, the Tai. The Cyrilla arida, I'm trying to find the comment that you have here, I guess also known as Tai as well?
Yeah, it's a species. And what's so fascinating, Bob McCartney at Woodlanders Nursery in Aiken found this thing in southern Florida, Zone 10, 9B or 10A, right down there, below Sebring, Florida. So that's very, very mild. So everybody thought, oh, here's a plant that it's only going to grow almost in the tropics. This thing has been taken to New England, and it survives there. So you can't judge just because something is growing in a very mild climate. It won't grow. It's not extremely cold hardy. And this one is Cyrilla arida, meaning it grows in an arid situation. He found it on these kind of sand mounds down there. Well, he's gone back. There's no sign of it.
Oh, my.
The whole housing development is. So if he hadn't have gotten the plant, it would have been lost.
And Ted, a little bit about this plant. I don't recall a fragrance. Is it fragrant?
Here again, you've asked the wrong person because
that's right.
I would have to pass that. But I can smell the rest of my flora. It is right, and I can smell that. I can't remember whether
See, with Aridus, as I think about it this past summer, it was so loaded with pollinators. Mm-hmm. I did not want to stick my face in there. They've got these beautiful white spikes of flowers.
Right.
And I just was really terrified of being nailed by something that I'm encroaching on that bee's territory. But it's beautiful. And something that had also occurred to me as a result of you mentioning the fact that you had gone to North Korea to talk about ecology and horticulture. Mm-hmm. As you know, this whole movement of trying to create a landscape that is pleasurable for us, but also provides nourishment for pollinators and all those birds you had talked about. And there's been a lot of research looking to plants like that. And I sort of had said in the past with my students, whenever we talk about plants, ask yourself, what are you going to do for me? All right, that's my New York accent. Sorry, from New Jersey. But what are you going to do for me has really changed, Ted. And as you know, teaching the ecology, but also just being mindful of our native species and introduced species, what are you going to do for us?
Right.
And so it's just not us and our friends and neighbors, but also with the wildlife. Mm-hmm. So really, I'm so looking forward to you speaking to my class this afternoon. My friends, I've had a grand time. I'm sorry for taking advantage of the microphone and spending all this time with my friend Ted Stevens, owner of Nurseries Caroliniana, a world traveler as well. We were delighted with his travels to the Far East. Also joined by Zach Ziebach, who is rather quiet, which is fine, Zach. He is a graduate student as well as a nurseryman as well. And my name is Bob Polomski here from the Madron Center. I hope you have a wonderful week. Let's hope for some more rain. Maybe a break this afternoon of a few hours so our students can get this lab final exam in. But it has been a pleasure, Ted, and I wish you safe travels.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Ted. That is our show for today, and we thank you, too. Today's garden discussion featured Dr. Bob Polomski, Clemson Extension Horticulturist, and his guest, Ted Stevens, founder of Nurseries Caroliniana in North Augusta, South Carolina, whose retail garden center focuses on rare and unusual plant material. Join us again next week as we will be live with Drew Lanham and Dr. Patrick McMillan answering your birding questions. Just Ask Us is produced in the studios of Clemson University Broadcast Productions, located at the Madron Conference Center. The mention of specific goods and services in no way implies endorsement by Clemson University or WFBS 107.9 Radio. Neither do the opinions expressed necessarily reflect those of Clemson University or WFBS 107.9 Radio. We invite listeners to respond to our program online through links at our website, WFBSFM.com. Just Ask Us is a public service program of Clemson University.